The 18th of September, 1931. Japan, seeking raw materials to fuel its growing industries, invades Manchuria, an industrial area located in northeastern China known for its rich mineral and coal reserves. In the following years, there will be various incidents or armed clashes of a limited nature between the Empire of the Rising Sun and the Republic of China. But full-scale war will not break out between the two countries until the Marco Polo Bridge Incident on the 7th of July, 1937. This marks the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War that will end only with Japan's surrender on the 2nd of September, 1945. During this war, which is the prelude to the Pacific side of World War II, the Japanese army scores major victories, capturing Beijing and Shanghai, and in December 1937, the Japanese military invades Nanjing, then China's capital. In China, Japanese soldiers commit unspeakable atrocities and engage in a campaign of mass killing, which over the course of 8 years will claim the lives of millions of Chinese civilians. One of the men responsible for these atrocities is a soldier of the Imperial Japanese Army, Yasuji Kaneko. Yasuji Kaneko was born on the 28th of January 1920 in Chiba Prefecture, Japan. Kaneko was only 11 years old when the conflict in Asia between Japan and China began. The Japanese invaded Manchuria on the 18th of September 1931, well before the official start of World War II. Despite Chinese opposition, the Japanese continued to advance, and by the 27th of February 1932, the last Chinese forces opposing the Japanese were forced to surrender, bringing all of Manchuria under Japanese control. Since the invasion of Manchuria, there were various incidents or armed clashes of a limited nature between the Empire of Japan and the Republic of China, but these had mostly subsided. However, this changed on the night of the 7th of July 1937, when a small Japanese force on maneuvers near the Marco Polo Bridge demanded entry to the walled town of Wanping to search for one of their soldiers. The Chinese garrison in the town refused the Japanese entry, a shot was heard, and the two sides began firing. The Chinese government, under strong anti-Japanese pressure, refused to make any concessions in the negotiation of the dispute, and the Japanese also maintained their position. As a result, the conflict escalated, with larger forces committed by both sides and fighting spread to other parts of China. Following the Marco Polo Bridge Incident, which marked the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War, or the War of Resistance against Japanese Aggression from 1937 to 1945, the Japanese achieved major victories. They captured Beijing, Shanghai, and the Chinese capital of Nanjing in 1937, leading to the Nanjing Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanjing. As the war continued, in April 1940, Yasuji Kaneko passed the conscription examination and was assigned as a private to the 44th Battalion of the 10th Independent Mixed Brigade in North China. During the war, Japanese soldiers viewed the Chinese people, especially Chinese women, in a highly derogatory and dehumanizing manner. This perspective was shaped by a combination of military propaganda, beliefs in racial superiority, and the brutal nature of the conflict. The treatment of Chinese women by Japanese soldiers, such as Yasuji Kaneko, often involved severe sexual violence and exploitation. During World War II, thousands of women were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military. These women were not willing prostitutes. Rather, they were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese forces. It is estimated that the number of comfort women or Japanese military sex slaves ranged between 50 and 200,000, 80% of whom were ethnically Korean. In the early 1930s, Japanese Imperial Armed Forces personnel in China employed professional prostitutes, most of whom were imported from Japan. The military brothels were called comfort stations, with the first established in Shanghai in 1931. However, with the rapid expansion of Japanese military activities and conquests, there was soon an acute shortage of women for this work. As a result, the Japanese military began recruiting comfort women from the conquered territories. The comfort women were subjected to threats of violence and starvation to control them. They endured constant abuse, hunger, and illness, which severely undermined their morale. Many were forced to serve between 20 to 40 men daily, while being kept under constant guard in cramped barracks, with minimal amenities like a mat and a bucket of disinfectant. Comfort stations were established to address the soldiers' perceived need for relaxation, to prevent them from seeking sexual services from local populations, which could lead to social and health concerns. Additionally, the military believed that providing these services would boost morale among their troops and reduce incidences of sexual violence against civilians in occupied territories. However, despite the presence of comfort stations, rape continued. For soldiers like Kaneko, who were of low rank and made little money, it made more sense to rape someone rather than pay for comfort women who were expensive. The first time Kaneko raped a Chinese woman was in 1943, when he and his fellow soldiers attacked a village and found a 21-year-old woman. Along with 5 of his companions, they drew lots to decide who would go first. One by one, they raped her, and then they killed her. Although the Japanese Army's criminal code mandated at least 7 years in prison for rape, Kaneko and his companions raped women anyway, because as Kaneko put it after they raped them, they killed them anyway. Years after the war, Kaneko claimed that he raped many Chinese women during the invasion of China. He added, "They cried out, but it didn't matter to us whether the women lived or died. We were the emperor's soldiers. Whether in military brothels or in the villages, we raped without reluctance." Kaneko despised the Chinese, whom he called chinks and other derogatory names. Besides committing rape, he was also involved in countless other atrocities against the Chinese civilians. On one occasion, in May 1941, Kaneko and his squadron forced 300 Chinese peasants to carry their supplies. Kaneko was responsible for monitoring and enslaving 2 of the peasants. He told them to walk faster, and when they could not, he brutally beat them with a club. After they fell unconscious to the ground, he finished them off. Other soldiers in his squadron forced an additional 20 civilians to do hard labor and then executed them. In October of the same year, Kaneko's squad deployed 2 small canisters of tear gas, set fires, and brutally killed 150 people, including Chinese communist fighters and innocent peasants. Kaneko himself deployed 1 canister of tear gas and set a pile of straw on fire to start a blaze in the village. He then began shooting at the people running out from the village, killing 3 of them. Next, he walked into the village and found 5 people seeking refuge in a well. Kaneko threw a large stone, of about 60 kilograms, into the well, followed by a hand grenade, killing the 5 peasants with the explosion. 1 month later, Kaneko arrested a wounded Chinese soldier and a 30-year-old Chinese woman. With 2 other Japanese companions, they tied the soldier's hands behind his back. Kaneko then lifted his feet while 2 other Japanese soldiers brought a large 40-kilogram stone and threw it at the soldier's head, killing him. They then held the woman down, and another Japanese soldier forced a liquid down her throat, which was a water solution of an industrial chemical used in a nearby factory. As a result of this, she died within 10 minutes. In August 1942, Kaneko, along with 2 companions, committed a heinous act against a young Chinese woman. Kaneko forcibly held her down, sitting on her and pressing down her hands. One companion then separated her legs, while the other inserted a metal rod into her vulva and stabbed it down, leading to her brutal death. A year later, in August 1943, Kaneko was ordered to break the riverbank of the Wai River, flooding nearby areas and spreading the cholera virus among the Chinese population. The following year, in August 1944, Kaneko tied the hands of a peaceful peasant behind his back. One of his companions attempted to cut the peasant's neck with a hay cutter, but 1/3 of the neck was still connected. Kaneko and 2 other soldiers then tied the peasant to a tree. The companion consequently bayoneted the peasant in the belly 3 times, brutally killing him. World War II in the Pacific ended on the 2nd of September 1945, when Japan formally surrendered to the Allied powers. Following Japan's surrender, Yasuji Kaneko was captured by the Soviets and detained in Siberia. In 1950, he was transferred to China, where along with other Japanese prisoners of war, he was subjected to a long-term crime recognition campaign by the Chinese Communist Party. This involved reflecting on their actions and voluntarily confessing their sins. The intense psychological pressure and overwhelming guilt led some internees to take their own lives. In 1956, Yasuji Kaneko was allowed to return to Japan, and it was not until 40 years later, in 1996 at the age of 76, that he started giving public testimony about the atrocities that he and the Japanese military had committed in China. He was 90 years old when he died on the 25th of November, 2010. 4 years before his death, in the 1996 interview with the Japan Times, Yasuji stated, "I murdered 100 people or more by torture." There were no tears shed for Yasuji Kaneko.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.